They say you can hate someone so much it consumes you. That anger can burn so hot it feels like fire in your veins. But what they don't tell you is this. Sometimes that fire isn't hatred at all. Sometimes it's something else entirely. Something you're too scared to name. I learned that truth on a cold October night when everything I thought I knew about myself came crashing down. When the girl who hated me looked into my eyes and whispered words that changed my life forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. I was 18 when I first saw Aria Bennett, and I knew right away that she was going to be trouble. Not the kind of trouble that gets you grounded or makes your parents angry. No, this was different. This was the kind of trouble that makes your heart beat fast every time you hear footsteps in the hallway. The kind that makes you hope those footsteps belong to her, but also terrifies you if they actually do. Aria lived 3 houses down from mine on Maple Street. Our neighborhood was one of those perfect suburban places where everyone knows everyone else's business. Her family moved in during the summer before my senior year of high school. I was 18, finally an adult, ready for my last year before college. The first time I saw her, she was carrying boxes up the front steps of her new house. I couldn't look away. She had this confidence about her that made her seem older than 18. Her dark hair caught the sunlight perfectly. Her eyes seemed to see right through you. And her smile? She definitely knew how powerful it was. But here's the problem. Aria Bennett hated me. Not just disliked me. Not just found me annoying. She actively, passionately hated my existence. And honestly, I had no idea why. It started on the first day of school. I was walking to my locker, minding my own business. The hallway was crowded with students everywhere. I accidentally bumped into her. These things happen, right? I turned around to apologize. Maybe introduce myself properly since we were neighbors and all. But before I could even open my mouth, she looked me up and down with pure disgust on her face. "Watch where you're going, princess," she said, loud enough for half the hallway to hear. Princess. Like it was the worst insult she could think of. Like the word itself tasted bad in her mouth. I stood there, completely shocked. I watched her walk away while her friends laughed. Suddenly, I felt smaller than I had since middle school. I'd never experienced anything like that before. I was used to being liked, or at least tolerated. I played varsity soccer. I had decent grades. I got along with pretty much everyone. But Aria Bennett looked at me like I was something disgusting she'd stepped in. From that day forward, it felt like she made it her personal mission to make my life miserable. Not in obvious ways that teachers would notice. Aria was too smart for that. It was subtle, calculated cruelty that somehow hurt worse than regular bullying. She'd walk into a room, and the temperature would drop 10 degrees. If I was talking to someone, she'd interrupt with some comment that made me feel stupid. She had this way of laughing at things I said that made me question myself. Made me wonder if I'd said something ridiculous without realizing it. Once, I was giving a presentation in AP history about the women's suffrage movement. I'd actually researched it thoroughly and felt confident about it. Aria sat in the back row. Every time I made a point, she'd raise her eyebrows slightly, or exchange looks with her friends. By the end of my presentation, I was stumbling over words I'd practiced dozens of times. The worst part, I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. I replayed our first interaction over and over in my head, trying to understand what had triggered such intense dislike. Had I said something offensive without realizing it? Was there some social rule I'd broken? Did I remind her of someone she hated? My friends tried to help. Sarah, who I'd known since kindergarten, had a theory. "Maybe she's just intimidated by you," she said. "Some people lash out when they feel threatened." That seemed ridiculous. What could possibly be threatening about me? I was 5'4", played defense on the soccer team, and my idea of rebellion was staying up past midnight reading romance novels. Emma, who was more direct, had different advice. "Just ignore her," she told me one day at lunch. "She's probably jealous. You're pretty, you're smart, you're popular. She's the new girl trying to establish herself." But that didn't feel right either. Aria didn't seem like someone who needed to establish herself. From day one, she commanded respect in a way that seemed completely natural. The truth was, despite how much she seemed to hate me, I found myself fascinated by her. Arya was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She was sharp, fearless, and completely unapologetic about taking up space. In English class, she challenged the teacher's interpretations of texts with arguments that were actually thought-provoking. She played guitar and wrote her own songs. She'd perform at the coffee shop downtown on open mic nights. I never went to watch, but I heard about it from people who did. They always came back talking about how incredible she was. How her voice could make you feel things you didn't expect to feel. There was something magnetic about her anger, too. The way she could shut down a conversation with a single look. The way she never backed down from a fight, even when she was outnumbered. I'd watch her in the hallways, surrounded by her small but fiercely loyal group of friends. And I'd wonder what it would be like to be on the receiving end of that loyalty instead of her contempt. I started paying attention to things about her that I probably shouldn't have. The way she always wore the same silver ring on her right hand, twisting it when she was thinking. How she took her coffee black and drank it while it was still too hot for most people. The fact that she always sat in the back left corner of every classroom, like she was planning her escape route. Small details that I collected without meaning to, storing them away like evidence of something I couldn't name. The worst part was the dreams. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, from dreams where Arya and I were having conversations that felt more real than any interaction we'd had in waking life. Dreams where she'd smile at me the way she smiled at her friends. Where her voice was soft instead of sharp. Where she looked at me like I mattered instead of like I was an inconvenience. I'd lie in bed afterward, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that it was normal to dream about people you disliked. That it didn't mean anything. That the strange ache in my chest when I woke up was just frustration at not being able to fix whatever was broken between us. But deep down, in a place I wasn't ready to examine too closely, I knew it was more than that. I knew that somewhere between the first cruel comment and the 100th cold shoulder, my feelings toward Arya Bennett had shifted into something I didn't have words for. Something that scared me more than her hatred ever could. Because at 18, in a small suburban town where everyone knew everyone else's business, there were some things you just didn't think about yourself. Some possibilities you didn't entertain. Even when they kept you awake at night. Even when they made your heart race every time you heard her voice in the hallway. I thought I could keep pretending forever. I thought I could survive senior year by avoiding her as much as possible. Then escape to college where I'd never have to see Arya Bennett again. I had no idea that everything was about to change. But Arya Bennett had other plans. And those plans involved completely turning my world upside down on a cold Friday night in October. It happened during homecoming week, which was already stressful enough without adding Arya's particular brand of psychological warfare to the mix. The whole school was buzzing with excitement. Streamers in our school colors hung from every available surface. The hallways smelled like spray paint from all the poster making. And everyone was either asking someone to the dance, being asked, or dramatically complaining about their lack of a date. I was part of the homecoming committee. Because of course I was. Good girls from good families volunteer for things like that. We'd spent the entire week after school in the gymnasium, transforming it into what our theme committee had optimistically called an enchanted garden. But what looked more like a craft store explosion. Still, there was something satisfying about the work. The way it kept my hands busy and my mind occupied. Arya, predictably, wanted nothing to do with any of it. I'd catch glimpses of her leaving school while the rest of us were still hanging fake flowers from basketball hoops. Her guitar case slung over her shoulder. Looking like she was headed somewhere infinitely more interesting than our small town had any right to offer. The night that changed everything started like any other committee meeting. We were putting the finishing touches on centerpieces. Sarah was telling us about her dress for the dance. Emma was complaining about her date's inability to coordinate his tie with her outfit. Normal teenage problems that felt both incredibly important and completely trivial at the same time. I was hot gluing silk roses to a foam ball, trying not to burn my fingers. That's when Mrs. Henderson came over with her clipboard and that stressed expression she'd been wearing all week. "Jessica," she said, and I knew immediately that I wasn't going to like what came next. In my experience, when teachers ask for huge favors, it usually means you're about to be volunteered for something you definitely don't want to do. But Mrs. Henderson had always been good to me. And besides, what choice did I have? "We're missing decorations for the back corner of the gym," she continued. "I had a whole box of them in my car, but apparently my trunk has been leaking and everything got ruined. I need someone to run to the storage unit and grab the backup supplies." She held out a set of keys. I could see my Friday night disappearing before my eyes. The storage unit was across town. By the time I got there and back, everyone else would be gone. I'd be stuck finishing the setup by myself. "I'll go with her," said a voice behind me. I turned around. There was Aria Bennett, standing in the gymnasium doorway like she'd appeared out of thin air. She was wearing a black leather jacket over a vintage band t-shirt. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that made her cheekbones look even more defined. She looked completely out of place among the pastel decorations and school spirit. But somehow that just made her presence more striking. Mrs. Henderson looked as surprised as I felt. "Oh, Aria, that's very kind of you to offer. But I thought you weren't participating in homecoming activities." Aria shrugged. Her expression was unreadable. "I'm not. But Jessica looks like she could use the help. And I don't have anywhere else to be." I stared at her, trying to process what was happening. In 3 months of school, Aria had never offered to help me with anything. If anything, she'd gone out of her way to make simple tasks more difficult. Why would she suddenly volunteer to spend her Friday night in a car with someone she clearly despised? But Mrs. Henderson was already pressing the keys into my hand. Relief was evident on her face. "You two are lifesavers. Just grab the box marked HC Backup and bring it straight back, okay?" Before I could think of a polite way to object, Aria was already walking toward the exit. "Come on, princess," she said without turning around. "Let's get this over with." The nickname still stung, but there was something different about the way she said it this time. Less venom. More resignation, maybe. I grabbed my jacket and hurried after her. My mind was racing with questions I didn't know how to ask. Aria's car was exactly what I would have expected. A beat-up black Honda Civic with band stickers covering the back window. A dream catcher hanging from the rearview mirror. The interior smelled like vanilla and something else I couldn't identify. Something that was distinctly her. She had good music playing. Something indie and melancholy that I'd never heard before, but immediately wanted to add to my own playlist. For the first 10 minutes of the drive, we sat in complete silence. Aria focused on the road with an intensity that seemed unnecessary for suburban traffic. I stared out the passenger window, trying to think of something to say that wouldn't result in another verbal assault. Finally, when we were stopped at a red light, she spoke. "You can stop looking so terrified. I'm not going to murder you and dump your body in the storage unit." I turned to look at her, startled by the almost playful tone in her voice. "I wasn't terrified," I said, which was mostly true. Just confused. "About what?" "About why you're here. About why you offered to help me when you usually act like being in the same room with me is physically painful." The light turned green. Aria accelerated smoothly through the intersection. For a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she said quietly, "Maybe I'm tired of acting." Something in her voice made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I was afraid of breaking whatever fragile peace had settled between us. Instead, I watched the familiar streets of our town slide past the window, and tried to ignore the way my heart was beating just a little bit faster than normal. The storage unit was in one of those sprawling complexes on the outskirts of town. All identical metal doors and fluorescent lighting. Aria parked near the entrance. We walked through the maze of units until we found the right number. The lock was old and stubborn. It took both of us working together to get it open. Inside, the unit was packed with decades of school decorations and supplies. Homecoming banners from years past. Christmas lights that probably hadn't worked since the 80s. Boxes and boxes of craft supplies that smelled like dust and forgotten celebrations. We found the box we needed toward the back, buried under a pile of deflated balloons and tangled streamers. As we worked to dig it out, our hands brushed against each other more than once, sending little electric shocks up my arm that I tried desperately to ignore. "Got it," Arya said finally, hefting the box into her arms. But as she turned to carry it out, her foot caught on something. She stumbled forward. I reached out instinctively to steady her. My hands landed on her waist. Suddenly we were standing much closer than we'd ever been before. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. Close enough to notice the way her lips parted slightly in surprise. For a heartbeat, maybe two, we just looked at each other. And in that moment, something shifted. The air between us felt charged. Electric. Full of possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider. Then Arya stepped back, breaking the spell. I dropped my hands like I'd been burned. "We should get back," she said. Her voice was carefully neutral. "Yeah," I agreed. Even though the last thing I wanted was to go back to the gymnasium and pretend this moment had never happened. But as we loaded the box into her car and drove back through the quiet streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between us. Something that couldn't be undone, no matter how much safer it might be to pretend otherwise. The ride back to school was different from the trip there. The silence felt heavier now, loaded with things neither of us knew how to say. Arya kept her eyes fixed on the road, but I caught her glancing at me from the corner of her eye more than once. Every time our eyes almost met, she'd look away quickly, like she was afraid of what she might see reflected back at her. My hands were shaking slightly in my lap. I clasped them together, hoping she wouldn't notice. But everything felt different now. The air in the car, the space between us. Even the music seemed to pulse with a new meaning I couldn't quite name. I wanted to say something, anything to break the tension. But what could I possibly say? That I'd felt something back there in the storage unit? That for one brief moment, the world had narrowed down to just the two of us, and it had felt more real than anything I'd experienced in my entire 18 years? No, that was too much, too dangerous, too honest. So I stayed quiet, and so did she. When we pulled into the school parking lot, most of the other cars were gone. The committee meeting had clearly ended while we were away. Just a few stragglers remained, and the custodial staff cleaning up. Arya parked close to the gym entrance. But instead of getting out immediately, she sat with her hands gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead at nothing. The engine ticked as it cooled. The music had stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own heartbeat. "Jessica," she said finally. Hearing my actual name instead of that mocking nickname made something flutter in my chest, like a trapped bird suddenly finding an open window. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, not trusting my voice to stay steady. She turned to look at me then, really look at me, and I felt like she was seeing parts of me I'd never shown anyone, parts I'd kept hidden even from myself. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" she asked quietly. "Like you're just going through the motions of being who everyone expects you to be? But inside, you're someone completely different." The question caught me off guard. It was so raw, so honest. Nothing like the carefully constructed barriers Arya usually kept between herself and the world. I wanted to give her an answer that matched her vulnerability, but the truth felt too dangerous to speak out loud, too revealing. If I admitted what I was really feeling, there would be no taking it back. "Sometimes," I said carefully. "Why?" She looked down at her hands on the steering wheel. Her knuckles were white from gripping it so hard. "Because I've been watching you," she said softly. "And I think maybe we're more alike than either of us wants to admit." My heart started beating so fast I was sure she could hear it. The car suddenly felt too small, too warm. I could barely breathe. "Arya," I whispered. "I don't understand what you're trying to say." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just a kind of desperate sadness that made my chest ache. "Yes, you do," she said. "You're just too scared to admit it. And honestly, so am I." She finally released the steering wheel, and turned her whole body toward me. We were close again, like we'd been in the storage unit. But this time there was nowhere to step back to. Nowhere to hide from whatever was happening between us. "I don't hate you, Jessica," she said. Each word seemed to cost her something. "I never hated you. I didn't know how else to deal with what I was feeling. And it was easier to be cruel than to be honest." "What were you feeling?" I asked, even though part of me already knew. Part of me had known from the very beginning. "Every time I saw you," she said, "laughing with your friends, being perfect at everything, fitting in so easily, it made me angry. Because you made it look so effortless. And I was over here struggling just to get through each day without anyone seeing how much I was pretending." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "But then I realized something," she continued. "You were pretending too. Maybe not the same way I was. But you were hiding something. I could see it in your eyes sometimes when you thought no one was looking. This sadness. This fear. And it made me wonder what you were so afraid of." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. No one had ever seen through me like this before. No one had ever looked close enough to notice the cracks in my perfect facade. "I'm afraid of a lot of things," I admitted. My voice was barely above a whisper. "Like what?" "Like not being who my parents want me to be. Like disappointing people. Like being different in ways that people won't understand or accept." I took a shaky breath. "Like feeling things I'm not supposed to feel." The last words hung in the air between us. Heavy with meaning. Impossible to take back. Arya reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was frozen, caught between fear and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Her fingers brushed against mine. Just the lightest touch. But it sent electricity racing through my entire body. "What if," she said carefully, "we stopped being afraid? Just for tonight. Just for right now. What if we stopped pretending and just were honest about what we're feeling?" "I don't know if I can," I said. And it was true. I'd spent so long building walls around the parts of myself that didn't fit into my perfect suburban life. I didn't know if I could tear them down, even for one night. "Yes, you can," Arya said softly. "You're braver than you think you are. I've seen it. In the way you stand up for your friends. In the way you work so hard at everything you do. In the way you've dealt with me being cruel to you for months, and you never once were cruel back." She squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to be brave about everything all at once," she said. "But maybe you could try being brave about this. About us. Just for a moment. Us." The word echoed in my mind. The possibility of an us, when just this morning I'd thought Arya hated me. When I'd been trying so hard to convince myself that my dreams about her didn't mean anything. "Why did you really offer to come with me tonight?" I asked. Arya smiled. A real smile. Not the mocking one I was used to, but something genuine and a little bit sad. "Because I couldn't stand it anymore," she said. "Pretending I hated you when really, I just wanted an excuse to be near you. To talk to you without my friends around, without the whole school watching. To maybe find out if you felt even a fraction of what I've been feeling since the day I moved here." "And what have you been feeling?" She looked at me with those dark eyes that had haunted my dreams for months. And when she spoke, her voice was steady and sure. "That I'm falling for you, Jessica. That I have been from the moment I first saw you. And it terrified me so much that I turned it into anger instead. Because anger was easier than admitting that I wanted something I thought I could never have." The world seemed to stop spinning. Everything narrowed down to this moment. This car. This girl who I'd thought hated me, but who was now looking at me like I was something precious and fragile and worth fighting for. "I dream about you," I blurted out. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Almost every night. And I wake up feeling confused and scared and wanting something I didn't even have a name for until right now." Arya's breath caught. Her hand tightened around mine. "What do you want?" she asked softly. It was the most important question anyone had ever asked me. And for the first time in my life, I knew the answer. I knew it with a clarity that cut through all my fear and doubt and carefully constructed pretenses. "I want to stop pretending," I said. "I want to stop being afraid. I want to see what happens if I'm honest about what I'm feeling. About who I am. About you. And what are you feeling? Right now, in this moment. I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the girl who had made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Who had challenged me and frustrated me and occupied my thoughts for months. Who was looking at me now with such hope and fear mixed together that it made my heart ache. I'm feeling like maybe hatred was never really hatred at all, I said slowly. Maybe it was just love wearing armor. And maybe we've both been hiding behind that armor for too long. Arya let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Or maybe a sob. Or maybe both. So what do we do now? She asked. It was a good question. We were two 18-year-old girls sitting in a car in a school parking lot, having just admitted feelings we'd barely admitted to ourselves. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business. We had families who expected certain things from us. We had futures already planned out that didn't include this moment. But none of that mattered right now. Not really. I don't know, I admitted. I've never done this before. Any of this. Neither have I, Arya said. I've spent so much time pretending to be tough and sure of everything. But the truth is, I'm terrified. Of what my parents will think. Of what people at school will say. Of messing this up before it even starts. Me too, I said. And it felt good to admit it. To let someone see my fear instead of always pretending to have it all together. We sat there for a long moment, just holding hands in the darkness of the car. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the dashboard. Inside the gym, I could see the custodian moving around, probably wondering where we were with the box of decorations. We should probably go in, Arya said finally. But she didn't move. And neither did I. Yeah, I agreed. We should. More silence. The comfortable kind now. The kind that didn't need to be filled with words. Then Arya said, "This doesn't have to be complicated. Not tonight, anyway. We don't have to figure everything out right now. We don't have to put a label on it or tell everyone or make any big decisions. Then what do? We take it one moment at a time," she said. "Starting with this moment, right here. And maybe if you want, we could do something completely normal. Like go get coffee after we drop off these decorations. And we could talk. Really talk. Without all the anger and pretending. The idea was so simple. So normal. Just two people getting coffee and talking. But it felt revolutionary. It felt like the start of something that could change everything. I'd like that, I said. And I meant it. Arya smiled then. A full, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. And I realized I'd never seen her smile like that before. Not at me, anyway. It was beautiful. Okay then, she said. Let's go drop off this box so Mrs. Henderson doesn't send out a search party. And then we'll go to that coffee shop downtown. The one where I play on open mic nights. I've never been, I admitted. I know, she said. I would have noticed if you had. I was always looking for you in the crowd, even though I told myself I wasn't. We got out of the car, and she grabbed the box of decorations from the back seat. As we walked toward the gym entrance, our shoulders brushed against each other. And this time, neither of us pulled away. Mrs. Henderson was relieved to see us. She thanked us profusely and immediately started pulling decorations out of the box, too focused on her homecoming preparations to notice the way Arya and I kept glancing at each other. You're free to go, girls, she said. You've done more than enough. Enjoy your Friday night. If only she knew just how much our Friday night had already changed. The coffee shop was small and cozy, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. A small stage sat in one corner, currently empty since it wasn't open mic night. Only a handful of people were scattered around the room, focused on their laptops or books. We ordered our coffees. Arya got hers black, just like I'd noticed. I got mine with cream and sugar. We found a corner table far from the other customers, somewhere we could talk without being overheard. For the first few minutes, we just sat there, warming our hands on our coffee cups, looking at each other like we were seeing each other for the first time. In a way, I guess we were. So, Arya said finally, tell me something real. Something you've never told anyone else. It felt like a test, or maybe an invitation, a way to prove that this moment in the car hadn't just been some temporary madness we'd both snap out of. I thought about it carefully. What could I tell her that would show her who I really was underneath all the pretending? I don't want to play soccer in college, I said. Everyone assumes I will. My parents, my coach, my friends. I've been playing since I was 6, and I'm good at it. But I don't love it. I've been doing it because it's what's expected of me. Because it looks good on college applications. Because it's part of who people think I am. What do you want to do? Arya asked. I want to write, I admitted. Stories. Maybe novels someday. I have notebooks full of them hidden in my room. But I've never shown them to anyone because what if I'm not good enough? What if it's just a silly dream? Arya reached across the table and took my hand. Right there in public where anyone could see. My heart jumped, but I didn't pull away. It's not silly, she said firmly. Dreams are never silly. And you know what? I bet you're better at it than you think. You see things. You notice details about people. I've watched you. The way you observe everything around you. That's what good writers do. How would you know? I asked. But I was smiling. Because I read everything I can get my hands on, she said. And I pay attention to the world around me. It's how I write songs. Same principle. Will you play me one of your songs sometime? I asked. Maybe, she said, a playful smile tugging at her lips. If you show me one of your stories. Deal. We talked for hours. About everything and nothing. About our families and our dreams and our fears. About books and music and all the things we'd never gotten to share with each other before. I learned that Arya's family had moved here because her dad got a new job. That she had a younger brother who annoyed her, but who she loved fiercely. That she wrote songs as a way to process emotions she didn't know how else to express. She learned that I felt suffocated sometimes by everyone's expectations. That I was scared of disappointing my parents. That I'd been having dreams about her for months and hadn't known what they meant until tonight. The coffee shop owner eventually came over to tell us they were closing. I looked at my phone and was shocked to see it was almost midnight. We'd been talking for 3 hours, and it had felt like minutes. Outside, the October air was cold and crisp. Our breath made little clouds in front of our faces. Arya walked me to my car, which was still parked at the school. We'd driven separately, but somehow it felt like we were leaving together anyway. When we reached my car, we stood there facing each other. Not quite ready to say goodbye. Not sure what came next. So, Arya said, what happens on Monday? When we're back at school and everyone's watching? It was a fair question. A scary one. But also one I'd been thinking about for the past few hours. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not ready to broadcast this to the whole school. Not yet. I need time to figure out how to be honest with my parents, with my friends, with myself. I understand, Arya said. I'm not ready for that either. My parents, they wouldn't understand. Not right away. But that doesn't mean this wasn't real, I said quickly. Tonight. This. Us. It was real, right? The most real thing I've felt in a long time, Arya agreed. Then maybe we can take it slow, I suggested. We don't have to hide exactly. But we don't have to make a big announcement either. We can just see where this goes. Figure it out together. Arya smiled. I like that plan. She stepped closer then. Close enough that I could see the gold flecks in her eyes again, even in the dim parking lot light. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath. Can I kiss you? She asked softly. My heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. Every nerve in my body was singing. Every fear had seemed small and far away compared to this moment. Yes, I whispered. She leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind. But I didn't want to. I'd never wanted anything more in my entire life. When her lips touched mine, it was gentle, tentative, perfect, like a question and an answer all at once. Like coming home to a place I'd never been before, but had always been searching for. It lasted only a few seconds. But in those seconds, everything changed. Everything aligned. Every piece of the puzzle that was my life suddenly clicked into place. When we pulled apart, We were both smiling. Really, truly smiling. I should go, I said reluctantly. My parents will wonder where I am. Text me when you get home? Arya asked. So I know you made it safely? You want my number? I teased. I've wanted your number since the day I met you, she admitted. I was just too stubborn to ask. We exchanged phones and added each other's numbers. And it felt like such a normal thing. Something teenagers did every day. But for us, it felt monumental. Good night, Jessica, Arya said. No more princess. Just my name, said softly like it meant something. Good night, Arya. I got in my car and drove home through the quiet streets. My lips still tingled from that kiss. My heart still raced from everything that had happened. My mind kept replaying the entire night over and over, like I was afraid if I stopped thinking about it, I might wake up and find it had all been a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. Arya Bennett didn't hate me. She never had. And I didn't hate her either. What I felt was something else entirely. Something that scared me and thrilled me and made me feel more alive than I'd ever felt before. When I got home, my parents were already in bed. I crept upstairs to my room and immediately pulled out my phone to text Arya. Made it home safe. Thank you for tonight. For everything. Her response came almost immediately. Thank you for being brave enough to be honest. Sleep well. I'll see you Monday. And hey, maybe Monday won't be so scary after all. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face. And for the first time in months, I didn't dream about Arya Bennett. I didn't need to, because the reality of what we'd shared was better than any dream could ever be. That night taught me something important. Sometimes the person who challenges you the most is the one who understands you best. Sometimes hatred is just love wearing armor. And sometimes, one night really can change everything if you're brave enough to let it. Arya was right about one thing. We were more alike than either of us wanted to admit. And maybe that wasn't something to be afraid of anymore. The girl who I thought hated me didn't hate me at all. She was just as scared as I was of what we might become if we stopped fighting it. She was scared of the same things I was scared of. Scared of being different. Of not fitting in. Of loving in a way the world might not understand. But we decided to be scared together instead of alone. And that made all the difference. I realized that night that the real trouble wasn't that Arya Bennett hated me. The real trouble was that I was falling in love with her. And I had been from the very beginning. I just hadn't been ready to admit it until she gave me permission to stop pretending. That's how love works sometimes. It starts as friction, as resistance. Two people pushing against each other until they realize they're actually pushing towards something beautiful. Something worth the risk. Sometimes you have to hate someone first before you can love them completely. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, they hate you right back for all the same reasons. Monday would bring new challenges. New fears. New questions about how to navigate this thing between us. But that was a problem for Monday. Tonight, I was just a girl who'd been kissed by another girl. And it felt like the beginning of everything. The girl next door didn't hate me after all. She just needed time to stop being afraid. And so did I. And now, finally, we were ready to start. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever loved someone who seemed impossible to reach, or if you've ever been too scared to admit the truth about your own feelings, you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop pretending and start being honest about who we really are. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever experienced love that started as something else? Have you ever been afraid to show your true self? Your story matters, and I'd love to hear it. And if you want to know what happened next between Arya and me, how we navigated Monday morning, what we told our friends, and whether our love survived the reality of our small town, let me know in the comments. There's so much more to our story, and I can't wait to share it with you. Don't forget to like this video if it made you feel something, and subscribe to Love Beyond Rules for more stories about courage, authenticity, and the beautiful mess of figuring out who we really are and who we're meant to love. Remember, your feelings are valid. Your story is worth telling, and you deserve to love and be loved for exactly who you are. Until next time, keep being brave. Keep being you. And never let fear stop you from reaching for the love you deserve.